Android's discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archived through March 23, 2014.
Savio, I refer to the spirit form of androids. It was mentioned that androids are enlivened by an artificially created spirit form. That is to say, they have no Medman spirit form. My question is, would these artificially created spirit form also observe the creative natural laws of reincarnation?
Oh, madame is the word. The android spirit forms are also capable of reincarnation, but not as human beings, but only as androids with android consciousness forms.
Contact Report 031.
An enormous space exists here with console-like furnishings in which apparatuses and screens are embedded. Before them are human beings and an unknown to me form of life, which I soon recognize as being biomechanical. Real biomechanical humans, androids. From somewhere, an android appears, bringing the camera. Very cleverly, it builds it into a frame and adjusts it to fit. Suddenly the thing speaks to me, and once more I am utterly astounded, though I cannot understand a word. Simyase quickly enlightens me.
It wishes you good luck.
But that cannot be. This thing cannot think and act independently. That would be crazy.
But nevertheless it does. Its whole body is half organic and its brain biochemical organic.
Contact Report 042.
What do you do then when someone needs a new limb or organ?
We have the possibility of a complete regeneration. Where this possibility no longer exists, however, we replace what is necessary with organs grown artificially from the cell tissue of the person concerned, which survive the lifetime of the body with complete certainty.
Could you not provide some suitable plans and details?
At present, this would still entail the greatest dangers, for it would enable the human being of the earth to witness semi-organic life, which they would misuse for the edification of androids and turn into extremely dangerous fighting machines.
And who works in the factories?
Robots and androids under the leadership and control of a few men and women, but who perform only technical surveillance and control tasks.
Contact Report 066.
Furthermore, I have to inform you that recently, more and more extraterrestrial intelligences are sending robot and android-manned ships to the Earth in order to be expeditionally active here. This has been the case for many years now, but this activity is currently being greatly increased, and Earth humans are often used as experimental and test objects.
Contact Report 109.
You think now of this apple. Sure, the taste has remained the same. It is perhaps even somewhat more intense than with your apples of this sort, and certainly much better in its juice. But all the other fruit trees from the earth also bear fruit with the tastes or flavors known to you. It's just that these, as I have already explained, have become somewhat more intense since our robots and androids maintaining the trees work on these very attentively, and also have great concern for them, as this happens with all plants cultivated by them.
Contact Report 137.
If we had put one of our androids in your position, then he would have destroyed himself if all of this illogicalness had arisen.
You have strange jokes in stock.
No, because my words correspond to the truth. We actually expected too much from you. A test has proven this. Quetzal came up with the idea. He wanted to know to what extent a half-organic apparatus could bear the illogicalness that has crept into the group. Quetzal programmed an android with all records of negating and negative forms of all group members. The results were awful. These unrestored, illogical modes of acting and thinking led to the fact that the android became crazy in all of its actions and speeches. Our androids are programmed based on absolute logic in thinking and acting, and these abilities surpass even our own respective abilities and potential. Now, during the transfer of data, Quetzal also paid close attention to the fact that your own data of your work and all your efforts toward the instruction of the group members and all their interests became programmed into the second android. Thus, the exact situation arose in the two androids, which included everything that happened between you and the group members since the beginning. On the one hand, the overall view of the group members was placed into the first android, and on the other hand, your data was placed into the second android. Expecting something terrible to happen, Quetzal placed both androids in an old beam ship in the vicinity of the planet Pluto, where he then activated them, and they began to live. Then, on our view screens, we could watch the terrible sight. Already after a few minutes, the android programmed with your data began to become visibly ill, while our recording devices registered an action of complete helplessness. Soon, completely apathetically, it wanted to destroy itself. But then suddenly, in the very next moment, it senselessly and angrily raised its voice. Meanwhile, the second android spoke absolutely crazy words without thinking and manipulated all of the ship's apparatuses without sense or purpose. Despite the visible internal difficulty of the android programmed with your data, it tried again and again to bring the other android, stored with the illogical data, to its senses, which it apparently managed to do quite often. But truthfully, this was only apparent. For as our recording devices clearly determined, the attempts of reconciliation and reason only worked so far that the logic of the words of the android representing you released reassuring impulses, while the second android did not at all have in mind to make the logical explanations its own. The investigations of the registry devices unambiguously proved that the negatively programmed android had developed a blatant form of self-addiction, egoism, and individualism, as well as a lust for power, and, despite the superficial acknowledgement of the logical explanations offered to it, etc., was unwilling to actually adopt them. Truthfully, as the recording devices unambiguously showed, it only wanted its own will to count and to enforce it, which finally went so far that your android rapidly deteriorated and suddenly became crazy. As we could see from our devices, his artificial organic brain mass slowly began to cook and to steam. Then there was an explosion, and his head was torn up beyond all recognition. Meanwhile, the other android, who only cared about this briefly, continued to act completely illogically and, moreover, spoke very confused and crazy things. Then the moment came when he wildly and senselessly hit the ship's equipment and created an inferno, when he accidentally touched the automatic self-destruct mechanism of the ship, and it was destroyed in an immense explosion. For us, it was proof that we had expected inhuman traits from you. What an android cannot take, a human life form cannot take either. Only through Quetzal's test could we grasp the full scope of what had caved in on you over all the years.
Contact Report 215.
Then now a question about the so-called Roswell case. Did a UFO actually crash there? Even though you have already confirmed this once, there are still some things that remain unclear, even with regard to the UFO crew, concerning which you said that they were androids. So what were the occupants really, and from where did the aliens come?
The Roswell case is a reality because the UFO crash actually took place there, but this is denied up to the present day and will continue to be denied in the distant future by the American military and secret services, as well as by all government agencies, namely with flimsy, changing, stupid, and ridiculous excuses that will only surely testify to the fact that everything actually happened. With the crashed object, it concerned a beam ship from the reticulum systems. The crew did not consist of natural human life forms, but of human androids of a bioorganic nature, which means that they were artificial human androids, which the U.S. Army also got a hold of, some living and some dead, and these were secretly kept in secret stations. With the bioorganic androids, it concerned effective artificial life forms, so not robots or the like, but independently thinking beings, in every way self-capable of making decisions made out of living material and living organs, bred in accordance with the human beings who are located in the reticulum systems. In Earth-human terms, these bioorganic androids bred by the reticulum human beings are actual life forms, and as such, they are respected by the reticulum people and are also appreciated and treated, for the androids are indeed artificial human beings. As such, they stand under the command of the real humans of the reticulum systems, on whose behalf they also carry out excursions, etc., to foreign star systems and planetary systems. And such artificial human forms were associated with the crash, as I already explained. The intelligence of these android beings stems from a bioorganic consciousness of an artificial form, which is just as capable of development as the consciousness of the normal, natural person. Therefore, it can also be creative and inventive. The type of consciousness is designed uniformly and collectively in each android, which means that all of the androids have a uniform consciousness form, and so they are collectively like-minded, and thus they have a collective form of telepathic communication. The form of consciousness of these artificial life forms is built on an artificial consciousness, which does not correspond to an actual personality, but rather to an artificial form, which can think quite independently, act and decide, as well as develop itself further, but which is not arranged into conscious evolution, but only functions in a conscious instinct-based manner. This means that there is, therefore, probably a capacity for the development of the consciousness form, whereby ideas are created and thought processes can take place, which are creative, inventive, and progressive, and, thus, capable of being developed. But all of this just deals with conscious instinct-based matters, and has nothing to do with conscious evolution. In any event, the form of consciousness of these bioorganic androids is an artificial organic element, which has no inherent creational spirit form. The form of consciousness of the androids is formed in such a wise that it has a certain independence, in spite of the collectivity, whereby a degree of individuality is given, which cannot be compared, however, to an actual personality in a consciousness-based sense. Nevertheless, it has its own individuality, which may seem like a contradiction to the Earth person, because they cannot understand these things in the tiniest part of their mind, and still cannot make any conceptions of this. He or she will only gain these conceptions and the understanding, as well as the knowledge relating to such android beings, in the distant future. The bioorganic androids of the reticulum human beings contain an authoritative programming in their artificial consciousness, which prevents that the artificial beings could ever rise over their designers, respectively, their creators. But the time of their lives is limited to 300 years of devoted servitude to these. Nevertheless, they are entirely free and can in every way decide as to what responsibilities they undertake, exercise, or decline, and thus whether they want to focus on a task or not. So they are in no way subject to compulsion by their creators. In the kind and wise in which they are biologically created, They are incapable of performing sexual acts and also of reproducing themselves. Their own and appropriate kind of consciousness is contained in their artificial brains, and as I already mentioned, the artificial bioorganic consciousness does not contain a creational spirit form, which would drive and animate this by its own energies. Animation is provided by the artificial brain, which is constructed in such a form that it can absorb and use the cosmic electromagnetic life energies, so that the existence of life is guaranteed. It is this cosmic energy by which the artificial life forms are animated and also made alive. All this, however, could not be recognized by all the doctors, surgeons, and pathologists, etc. in the American secret stations, where the crashed android beings were taken. But how could they, since their knowledge relating to this was not in place yet? In fact, it will still take many centuries and even several millennia before the terrestrial scientists arrive at the possibility of creating such beings like the bioorganic androids. Therefore, these beings will remain an unsolvable mystery to them for a very long time, as it is also the case for them with regard to the crashed beings in Roswell.
Now that was really detailed. Thank you for your explanations. But one thing still interests me. With you, I have also seen androids, so artificial life forms that can think and act independently. Are these the same as the android beings of Reticulum?
On the whole, yes. Only the appearance of our androids is different in nature, for they are created after our likenesses, while the Reticulum androids resemble their creators, who are, in spite of their high technology and various sciences, still very unknowing in terms of really spiritual and creational interests, yet still arranged into a high and liberal culture with expressed human rights.
Contact Report 238.
When Nakademion built up his robot armies and his android armies in his time, he did so in a manner that still seems utopian to today's Earth human, because he built a multi-duplicator for this purpose, which multiplied everything he programmed with an atomic blueprint, etc., infinitely many times in absolute unison. Thus, Nakademion actually only needed to construct one copy of each type of robot, as well as one copy of the androids, after which he could multiply them in infinite numbers using the multi-duplicator. Even the tiniest atomic detail of the final product resembled the prototype, which served only as a perfect model. In fact, such a multi-duplicator is a giant apparatus that produces clones. In other words, one could also say that it is a copier or duplicator that provides an exact copy of the original, not only the externally visible, but also the interior, down to the last and finest atomic structure. The question is whether you also have such multi-duplicators, which are based on electrons, which are based on their operation with regard to the required energies, but also with regard to the required matter for the multi-duplications to be generated. If I remember correctly, then the unexhaustible cosmic electron seas are tapped in order to transform and form the necessary matter from the electrons, from which then the templates programmed by atomic images receive their material form and are materially duplicated.
This wonderful invention of Nakademion has remained with us, even if today everything has been changed and renewed to such an extent, precisely in accordance with the inevitable progress that nothing points to its origin. We have been producing all necessary building materials of all kinds, machines, robotic tools, androids, and also medicines and food, etc., in this form for thousands of years by duplicating them.
Contact Report 260.
Good, now we've brought it to a common denominator. My question about this is, how is a treatment or an intervention handled when, for example, a surgical intervention becomes necessary? Surgery is indeed a very bloody work, I think. Is it also still so bloodily maintained with you?
Of course not, because we have long outgrown this bloody barbarism. Now our technology relating to this is so far developed that we can avoid all bloody interventions. Our apparatuses and devices, etc., are designed in such a way that open surgical interventions no longer have to be made. For all manipulations in or on the body are carried out in a pure, vibration-related manner. Thus, internal or external wounds, as well as broken bones and torn blood vessels, can be closed, joined, and healed within seconds or a few minutes. The operation of the apparatuses and devices, etc., occurs, of course, through trained doctors and other specialists, including bioorganic electronic androids, simply said. In addition, these are able to transport themselves to any location within a range of 300,000 kilometers, even there where they are needed. This occurs through a teleportation by apparatus.
You mean that they can beam themselves to any location, just like that?
Yes, but that is nothing unusual.
For us Earthlings, it is. Then these androids are true doctors?
Certainly.
Contact Report 590.
But how big is, according to the earthly masses, the whole huge area of land, which you control with all the life forms on it in many different genera and species, and which is also partly cultivated by your androids?
According to the masses known to you, the entire area is about 340 square kilometers, but my personal property per family is only 1 hectare, while the rest of the land belongs to the general public, but is made available to me for the purpose of keeping animals and other forms of life.
Contact Report 675.
But something else that refers to you, Playaran, because as you have explained to me, the majority of the population works only 2 hours or so per day according to our time, while the other time is used in a private way. You have told me that in your free time the Playaran work and maintain their large private gardens, which cover at least 1 hectare or 10,000 meters. Others fly with their aircraft over land or around the planet, and land where other people work to do private work together. And all this happens without any financial compensation, because you have no financial economy anymore. But even if you are only about 530 million people on Era, there's quite a lot of work to be done to feed the whole population and to satisfy all their other needs. I will ask you how you manage this so that everything can be created when the majority of your humanity works only 2 hours a day for the general public. Is there no problem with that?
The whole thing would be impossible if we did not have our very sophisticated, extensive, and diverse technology at our disposal. Basically, of course, our planetary population also has to do a lot of work, which has to be carried out, but which is largely carried out by our highly developed technology. The main of all activities is carried out by elaborate androids, apparatuses, and machinery, which are monitored and controlled by the majority of the working population during the 2 hours of work. And these are effectively only surveillance and control works to be carried out by the majority of the Era population, according to times in day and night divisions, to which you once said around the clock in another context.
Contact Report 770.
Then I have the question about prostitution, fornication. I was asked how you on Era do it. Do you also have brothels or something like that?
We do not know of such things. Our directives also do not contain any such records, because basically everything in this respect is frowned upon and regulated among our peoples before it comes to emergency situations. We have regulated everything in this respect in such a manner that androids are available to regulate all private needs in this respect on a truly private basis, without any public prostitution taking place. Thus, everything is regulated privately, in such a way in female and also in male respect. Consequently, female as well as male androids are available, but never human beings who would give themselves to this activity. Of course, partnerships of this kind exist between two human beings, but as such they are firm unions, and consequently no prostitution is practiced in this relationship either.